Well, football fans, draft junkies, the Big D is ready as we look at our draft winners and losers. Before I bring in George Reed, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. Just finished up UFC 301, so you can check it out. Also, check out the Big D podcast for your audio listeners, Spotify and Apple. So, joining us, the guy who's done more dynasty drafts than the Big D ever wishes to do. GeorgeReedFF. So, George, are you on Dynasty Draft number 1,258 now?
Well, between the leagues that I actually play in and then the leagues I actually commission, I have roughly about 20 to 25 leagues every single year that I have some type of a role in. A lot of those are definitely dynasty leagues because they're a lot easier to deal with. I don't have to sit down and worry about doing a whole redraft and all that. But it's yeah, I do a lot. I've got two drafts going right now. One of them is an insane league. It's a 32 team league. It's full IDP. It's got one player, so there's only a single copy player in that league. So 32 teams, you got 32 quarterbacks, you got to start 32 tight ends. You got to start two running backs, three wide receivers, two defensive linemen, three linebackers, and then three in the secondary. So it's a really really deep league, and we call it the Junkies League because the only people who play in it are fantasy football junkies.
So, so that just seems like an odd year. So, like, defensive players, so like Aaron Donald would have been like the 1-on-1 in terms of defensive plays, right?
No, actually, guys like T.J. Watt, the linebackers, your linebackers, because they get 100 yard or 100 tackles almost every year. So your upper echelon linebackers are the ones that really really do well, like your Roquan Smith, Micah Parsons, the guys who get you a lot of sacks, T.J. Watt, like those type of guys would actually score more points than Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Who's the linebacker? Who's the linebacker in San Francisco? Not the one who tore his
Fred
Achilles.
Warner.
Yep.
Yep, he's a really high for IDP. He scores a ton of points as well. Yeah, it's very interesting because like if your quarterback gets injured, especially early on, like your team's pretty much sunk for the year unless you can trade for a quarterback because typically nobody has a starting backup quarterback. So on bye weeks, like you actually have teams that will play nobody in certain positions because the depth is so thin. You're taking running back three and running back four on teams and hoping and praying that they get like 3 or 4 points each week just so it's not a goose egg at the position. It's a crazy, crazy league. But it is also so fun. Like you got to start 64 running backs. Like I can't name 64 running backs in the NFL, and this league is requiring you to like a total that we have to start that, and then we have a flex position. You got to start. Let me see, 32, like 96 wide receivers, not counting your flex. Like it's absolutely stupid. But this is our 10th year doing this league, so it's fun. The banter is off the charts in the chat. We have 32 people on Sleeper who just constantly banter each other and talk crap. It costs everybody $15 to play in the league. It's not super expensive, but when you do like 15 times 32, like the payout gets up there pretty quick for your ROI for what you've actually invested to play in the league. So, and I actually have a good team in that league right now. So it's starting to hit the age apex. So I'm gonna have to blow it up soon. But I've actually got a really good team in that league.
Yeah, maybe the team that's got Kirk Cousins should draft Michael Penix.
Uh, I mean, if we follow suit in the NFL, they would. But listen, Michael Penix will get drafted in this league. Like there are retired players who are still on some players' rosters, hoping that they would come back. Like Rob Gronkowski is still rostered in this league because somebody is hoping that Rob Gronkowski decides at one point to unretire and come back. Tom Brady is still rostered in this league because there's chatter. he might come back and play for the Raiders. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's stupid the players that get held onto for as long as they do. Like Larry Fitzgerald got held onto forever when he decided to hang up just in case he came back. It's just it's crazy. Like the trades in that league, you can't really value the players that get traded in that league because the values are so off. Like at one point, I traded a future first round pick for Doug Baldwin, and then he up and retired the next season. Like it's a fun league, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird how times have changed. So
Yep.
obviously, looking back on what happened last week in Detroit, and no one was surprised with the first three picks. I mean, we all knew
Yep.
Caleb Williams was going to the Bears. We knew Jane Daniels was going to the Commanders, and we sort of knew Drake May was going to the Patriots, right?
Yep. So none of those picks actually surprised me. So right before the draft, the day of the actual draft, I did a what's it called a mock draft that I pushed out on Twitter, where you can find it at GeorgeReedFF. And what it basically was is exactly what I said. It's a mock draft on where I thought players would go. And I selected for all 32 teams. I had Caleb Williams going 1, Jalen Daniels going 2, and Drake May going 3. So none of those surprised me at all. I had all 3 correct. I had Marvin Harrison going 4 to the Cardinals, which that's where he went. I had Joe Alt going 5 to the Chargers, which is where he went. And I had Malik Neighbors going to the New York Giants. So the first 6 picks in the draft I nailed. Or no. The Giants took... Yeah, they took Malik Neighbors, right?
Yep.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking they took Roma Dunze, but no. Yeah, they took Malik Neighbors. So I had all of those correct. The first 6. I'm like, I could be a professional draft guy. Like this is easy. I'm nailing all these first 6 picks. Like I've seen guys who are fantasy guys and industry guys who are being paid lots of money by big companies, and they're like just way off on their draft predictions. This is easy. I got number 7 wrong. I had the Titans taking Fashanu, and I forget who they took. Oh, they took J.C. Latham. So I had the position right, just the wrong player. So I felt, okay, I missed that one. Yeah, at 7, right position, wrong player. I undervalued J.C. Latham apparently, and then I had Dallas Turner going to the edge, going to the Falcons at 8. And the Falcons literally just took a grenade and threw it and blew up everybody's draft predictions. It was insane that they took Michael Penix at number 8.
I mean, to be honest, I had the Falcons taking Dallas Turner too, but I can understand why the Falcons took Penix. I think there were 66 starting quarterbacks last year. 66.
I get that, and I understand that, but at the same time, you just gave, like, literally 2 months ago, you gave Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed. You're drafting a guy who, by the time he has an opportunity to start in the NFL, he's going to be 27 years old. He's already 24 years old. He had 6 years in college. When I watched Michael Penix at the Senior Bowl, a couple of different things stood out to me. One, his accuracy was terrible. He especially his intermediate and deep pass. Like, he was not throwing the ball at intermediate routes or downfield at all in the Senior Bowl. He just was not. Everything was checked down or underneath. And then, excuse me, pressure. When pressure got to him or he felt pressure, like, he threw the ball away. He does not like getting hit. He does not like defenders in his face. He was not a first round graded quarterback. Neither him nor Bo Nix. I personally had both of them as mid to late second round, potential third round at best, at absolute worst. and both of them went in the top 12 picks, which absolutely blew my mind. Um, the Falcons, the reason I had Dallas Turner going there, they were the worst rush pressure team in the NFL last year. Like they got the fewest sacks and had the least pressure on quarterbacks in the entire NFL. And then you got Dallas Turner staring at you in the face, and you're going to draft a guy who the GM comes out and says, "Oh yeah, if Michael Penix is starting for us in 4 to 5 years, it's a great pick." I'm sorry, you're drafting at number 8. You don't draft a guy at number 8 who potentially could be starting for you in 4 to 5 years. That's not what you want. This is not a Jordan Love situation. This is completely worse than that.
Um, I'm just thinking because it seemed like more teams were interested in Penix than JJ McCarthy. I mean, because watching both guys play a lot this year, I thought Penix was a better player. Big arm, yeah, McCarthy could move, but I thought JJ McCarthy looked like Alex Smith. I mean, Penix, yeah, his mobility is next to nothing now, but he possessed the best arm in this draft. And I think for a really good online in Atlanta,
Well,
Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson, the Falcons thought, we don't know how well Kirk Cousins will come off the torn Achilles.
well, if he can't come back from that torn Achilles like that, again, that just points directly to the Falcons organization and their failure in their front office and in their medical staff on player evaluation, right? Like it's not like they signed Kirk Cousins last year and gave him this money guaranteed, and then he got hurt playing for them. No, they first off they tampered with him, and the NFL is eventually going to fine the Falcons for tampering with him. Um, but they tampered with him. They did all this medical buildup on him. They looked at him. They evaluated him, and if he's not ready to go, and they knew that going in, and they still gave him $100 million guaranteed, like the absolute failure of the front office and medical staff of the organization of the Atlanta Falcons.
Maybe looking back on it, the Raiders should have signed Kirk Cousins because you look at the Raider quarterback room, it is gross right now with Aiden O'Connor and Gardner Minshew.
I was gonna say you're the Jacksonville guy. You don't like the stash. You don't like Minshew mania. What's going on here?
Hey, I'll be completely objective. I love Gardner Minshew with Shane Steichen. I don't love Gardner Minshew in Las Vegas.
You know what Gardner Minshew is? He's a Pro Bowl quarterback. That's what Gardner Minshew is. No, I agree. I think the Raiders. It's weird. Because you got Devontae Adams, who is still an elite wide receiver in the NFL, right? They went out and last year they spent a second round draft pick on Michael Mayer at the tight end position, and then this year they go out and they draft Brock Bowers in the first round at the tight end position. So it makes me wonder if they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel, and if they do, you got Zamir White in the backfield. Gardner Minshew is a game manager who will take some shots. Excuse me, let me drink. Gardner Minshew, game manager who will take shots down the field, but he's not the long-term answer. I think they get their quarterback next year.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're the Raiders, I mean, Brock Bowers at 13 felt like an amazing pick. I mean, Tom Telesco definitely went BPA with his first couple picks. I mean, getting a guy who should have been probably a top 10 pick at 13, right?
I mean, yeah, but the problem is like, I think any other draft, Brock Bowers would have been like a top 8 pick, top 7 pick. The problem with this draft was you had really you had 6 quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks, but you had 3 that were really really high prospect quarterbacks, and Caleb Williams, Drake May, and who am I leaving out? Jaden Daniels, and then you had 3 elite tight ends or not tight ends, wide
Yeah,
receivers
yeah.
rather, in Harrison, Odunze, and Neighbors. And then you add in your offensive linemen. That this draft was super super deep in both wide receiver and offensive linemen. Like it was a weird draft this year to have that much top end heavy positional players to where last year, yeah, I think Brock Bowers probably would have went top 8 last year. But this year, it's just between all the offensive linemen, the quarterbacks, and the wide receivers, like all the premium position, the positions that teams value at a high rate, quarterback, wide receiver, and tackle, offensive line, it pushed Bowers down a little bit, and I'm not really that surprised because of how top loaded this draft actually was.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the first 14 picks all on the offensive side of the ball was like, wow. I knew this was a great offensive draft. I didn't think that 72% of the first round would be on one side of the ball.
No, neither did I. So when I did my mock draft, like I said, my first defensive player I had going 8 to the Falcons. My second defensive player, I'm looking at it right now, I had going 9 to Chicago. And one took a quarterback and one took a wide receiver. Both positions I felt neither team really needed. Like it's great that the Bears were able to go out and draft Roma Dunze. You know, Caleb Williams coming in is locked and loaded to win right now with Chicago. If you look at their wide receiving core, their tight end room, their running back room, but I thought they would go with Latu, the edge out of UCLA. Like I felt like they really needed to add another edge player to that defense, and that's not what they did. Teams just went bananas for the first half of the draft on offensive players, and it was fun to watch. But sitting there at 15, I don't think the Colts actually believed they had, their pick of the litter on the defensive side of the ball. Like any player they wanted at 15, they were going to get. Like they would not have thought that coming into the draft. There's no way they thought that's the way the board would fall. But that's what it happened.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I was sort of happy the Bears got Roman Dusing, even though they needed a pass rusher, because I think you give Caleb Williams every chance to succeed. I was happy for the Jets that they didn't draft Brock Bowers because that you can't have 230 something year old tackles, and of course the Vikings and Broncos took quarterbacks. To me, I wonder, did the Vikings maybe overpay too much in getting the fourth or fifth best quarterback in this draft in J.J. McCarthy because they gave up so much ammo to move up. Then they gave up to get another first round pick. Then moved up for McCarthy and Dallas Turner.
So I don't think they gave up too much to move up, and the reason why I don't think that is, I think the Broncos were in serious talks to move up with the Jets to get one pick ahead of the Vikings to take J.J. McCarthy. And if the Broncos would have done that, like the Vikings would have been stuck there looking at either Penix or Bo Nix, and I don't think they had first round grades in either one of them. So they had to walk out of this draft with a quarterback. If they didn't trade up for one of the top 3, J.J. McCarthy I felt was their next best option. And so knowing that the Broncos actually did go out and get Bo Nix at 12, I feel like Minnesota trading what they had to trade to move up to get their guy, they absolutely had to. And to be honest, what they gave up was a lot better than what a lot of people were talking about they would have to give up to get to number 4 to draft J.J. McCarthy at 4.
It
Because
would
people
have
were
to.
talking.
It would have to be 11-23 and a 1 next year.
Exactly. And that's not the price they paid to move up and get their guy at 10. So it was, while they paid a lot to the Jets to move up one spot, it was still considerably a lot less than what they would have had to pay up to get their guy at 4, which everybody was expecting them to have to do. So I mean, they got their guy. I get if somehow JJ McCarthy turns into a starter for the Vikings for the next 10 years, is anybody going to care what the Vikings had to pay later on in the draft to move up one spot to get him? Absolutely not.
I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs give a belief what they gave up for Patrick Mahomes, right?
Woo-hoo. Oh, let's talk about Buffalo. I love it. As the Dolphin fan, I love when the Chiefs and the Buffalo trade because it never works out for the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo, if you don't know, Buffalo and Kansas City traded a few years ago. Chiefs ended up drafting a quarterback by the name of Pat Mahomes, and then this year they said, you know what? Kansas City, that trade worked out so well for us the first time. We're going to trade again with you, and you guys can take Xavier Leggett.
Xavier
a lot, or was it? Yes, Xavier Worthy. I'm sorry. I just looked at the list real quick, and I just seen Xavier, and I thought it was Leggett. They took Xavier Worthy. If you don't know, he was the fastest at the combine. A lot of comparisons to Tyreek Hill. I will tell you this right now. There's only one Tyreek Hill. He is not Tyreek Hill just because they're fast and they're wide receivers. That doesn't mean that they are the same style of player. Tyreek Hill has a much better route tree than Worthy does right now, but Worthy is still a very, very good wide receiver, and I'm excited to see what those two are going to be able to do. Now, hopefully, they won't be able to do it against my Dolphins, but if you look at the wide receiver core right now in Kansas City, adding Worthy, it is so much better than what Patrick Mahomes has had the last couple of years. And the Buffalo Bills just look like fools again. Anytime the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City get together, Buffalo looks like a fool, whether it's the playoffs, whether it's the drafts, it does not matter. Kansas City always ends up on top.
Why do you think the Bills messed up here? Because I actually like the Bills moving back, getting more picks. Both of them didn't exactly come into this draft with a lot of picks.
I here's the problem. When they did draft a wide receiver, they drafted Keon Coleman. I am not a huge Keon Coleman guy. I like him as a person. I don't like him as a potential NFL wide receiver. I think there's a lot to be desired there. He's going to have to get coached up. I'm just not a big Keon Coleman guy. I think the Bills messed up when they traded back and they didn't take Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey is a much better wide receiver than Keon Coleman, and he went one pick later to the Los Angeles Chargers. The problem Coleman is going to have is he gets very little separation downfield, and so you're going to have to rely on Josh Allen to put it in a tight window and allow him to go up and get it. And Josh Allen can do that to an extent, but it's not. Ladd McConkey is. I compare him. He's got more of what Stephon Diggs was able to do on the field than what Keon Coleman compared to Stephon Diggs was able to do. So I don't feel like Coleman is a true wide receiver one, where I like Ladd McConkey as much as I think he could be a true wide receiver one. I think he's got a lot of Cooper Kupp in him. I think he's got a lot of Tyler Lockett in him and Doug Baldwin, like those type of wide receivers. I think he's got
Julian Edelman.
Nope, because they play different positions. Julian Edelman was a slot guy. Ladd McConkey, he's not a slot guy. He played very, very little in the slot.
I mean, Keon Coleman's a big receiver. It's a big receiver. I mean, Josh Allen's never really had a big receiver. I mean, yes, Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, Gabe Davis.
But Gabriel Davis was more consistent in Buffalo's win forecast.
I agree, and we don't know if Keon Coleman is Gabe Davis 2.0. We just don't know that. The jump from college to NFL is huge, and I'm not comfortable. I wouldn't feel comfortable if Keon Coleman was my wide receiver one on my team. Let's just put it that way. If I had to rely on Keon Coleman as my wide receiver one, I'm not comfortable. I view him more as a wide receiver two for teams than a one.
I'd be more comfortable in Josh Allen with QB though.
He solves a lot of problems. I will say that much.
I don't want Bryce Young being my quarterback.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind Bryce Young as my quarterback, but the problem is we really don't know what Bryce Young is. Like you could take last year and throw it out the window. Who was he throwing to last year? Like going into the season, his best wide receiver was a 32-year-old Adam Thielen. I mean that's not the quarterback's fault. He's got nobody to throw to, right? They went out. They added Deontay Johnson. I love Deontay Johnson. I think he's going to do wonders for that offense. In the draft, they added Jonathan Brooks. Like they added a tight end. They added. Let me see. I'm looking right here. Jatavion Sanders. They added Jatavion Sanders. I think they even drafted a wide receiver, didn't they? Xavier Legette. So they've gone out and got Bryce Young some weapons now that he did not have last year. Like, I think they're going to be better. I think Bryce Young will be better. I think writing Bryce Young off and saying that he's going to be a bad quarterback because of what he did last year, I don't think that's fair because he really didn't have anything on that offense outside of Adam Thielen. Like, that offense was just terrible. Like, you're relying on Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. Like, the Miles Sanders experiment did not work at all. Like, that did not. I liked Miles Sanders a lot last year. I thought for sure he'd get at least 85 targets and have at least 300 rushes of the ball. Nope, did not happen. Huge disappointment. I was completely wrong on that. But like that offense was putrid. There was no offensive weapons at all. There was nobody for Bryce Young to throw to. And then on the offensive line, I believe they were one of the worst offensive lines in the league as well. So he was back there running for his life. Like it just was a bad situation last year. And I think, in this draft, given how much they traded away last year to move up to get Bryce Young, to trade for that number one spot overall, like, they brought in a first round wide receiver. They brought in a running back who I feel is, if Jonathan Brooks did not tear his ACL, he probably would have went in the first round this year. And I'm not the only person who feels that way. There's quite a few people who feel he was the best running back in this league, in this draft. The only thing holding him back is he's coming off an ACL. There's only been a handful of guys, like 5 or 6, that have ever come back off an ACL the next year and ran for over 1,000 yards. We all know about Adrian Peterson and his 2,000, but there's been a handful that have done it over 1,000 yards, and that's it. So it's one of those things where coming back after the first year of your ACL, the production is not there as much as you would like. It gets better the further, the more time you spend away from the ACL, the longer it's been since you tore it, the better it gets. And so long term, I love Jonathan Brooks in Carolina, but they gave him a competent running back. They added a nice tight end in Jatavion Sanders. A while for him to adapt to the NFL. Tight ends typically do, but he's a competent tight end on the offensive side of the ball for them. And like you said, they gave him a wide receiver at the end of the first round in Xavier Legette. So now you're talking Xavier Legette, Deontay Johnson, and Adam Thielen, Jonathan Brooks and Chuba Hubbard, and then Jatavion Sanders at tight end. Like, that is a much better offensive side of the ball for Bryce Young than what he had last year. And then everybody looks at what they did over in Houston with C.J. Stroud. It's like, well, he's the much better quarterback. Well, yeah, he had much better weapons to work with. Of course he's going to look a lot better. We don't. If you're comparing Bryce Young to C.J. Stroud, it's really not fair because one guy came into a situation where he had Nico Collins, he had Tank Dell, he had who was their tight end? He was Dalton Schultz. Yeah, that's right. He had Dalton Schultz at tight end. Like, he had John Mechie. He had Robert Woods. Like he had guys that are competent NFL players to throw the ball to, and he looked phenomenal. They had one of the best offensive line in the NFL. I think they got the highest paid left tackle in the league, and the former Dolphins tackle. What's his name?
Robert
Shoot,
Hunt.
nope. They drafted him 13 overall when the photo of the bong came out with him in the bong gas mask.
Laremy Tunsil.
Laremy Tunsil, that's his name. I couldn't think of it. That's their left tackle. Like they've got a great offensive line, so they're able to protect the quarterback. Like his situation was so much better than what the situation that Bryce Young fell in. So I'm not going to write Bryce Young off in Carolina just yet. Like I'm going to give the guy at least 3 years before I can write him off and say he's not a very competent quarterback or a very good quarterback, because I think these guys need time to develop. We're so much entrenched in a what can you do for me right away now mentality in the NFL that we don't give guys time to develop. Like we expect them to be able to make that jump from college to the NFL right away. And even if the situation is not the greatest, we still want to see, we want to see them be great. And it's just not fair because there's a huge learning gap. There's a learning curve that needs to happen. And they're just not used to it, and it takes time, and we don't give them the time to do it. So I'm not going to write off Bryce Young just yet. I want to give him at least 2 more seasons to see what he can actually do before I'll make fun of Carolina for taking him over CJ Stroud.
Yeah, in a way, I feel like people are going to compare Bryce Young to Trevor Lawrence's first year, and then Trevor Lawrence won a playoff game in year 2. So we'll ask some Bryce Young. He'll be better. He can't be any worse, right?
Listen. No, he can. Well, I mean, he can be worse, but I hope not. But I don't even recognize Trevor Lawrence's rookie year. Like for me, he never had the rookie year he had. That rookie year is completely erased from my memory. Urban Meyer was the coach. I'm sorry, I don't recognize anything that happened that year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's completely burned from memory. I don't remember anything about it.
He who shall not be named. He actually went 2-0 against the Dolphins and Bills, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, I mean, dead clock, right? Twice a day, right?
Speaking of the Jags, Jacksonville took Brian Thomas, moved back from 17 to 23, and took Brian Thomas. So, what do you think of the Jags taking BT at 23?
Let me ask you. You're the Jacksonville fan here. What do you think about it?
I wanted a corner.
Yeah, there was some great corners available at 23. Matter of fact, all the cornerbacks were available at 23, if I'm not mistaken. You could have had your pick of cornerbacks, I believe.
I think he had twice because the Eagles took Mitchell at 22.
Yep. So you could have had any quarterback you want. Obviously, the front office felt, they're doing everything they can to help Trevor Lawrence succeed on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like they lost Calvin Ridley. Well, they didn't lose him. They just chose not to re-sign him, which I think was the right move for the organization, by the way. And then they drafted BT, and then they just cut Zay Jones, which I don't know how you feel about that. I think Zay Jones, he's a quality wide receiver 3 for a team. But I like BT. I like him coming into Jacksonville. I think he's set up to do very well. You still have Christian Kirk there, so you got that veteran presence in the locker room. If I'm not mistaken, he's a big play wide receiver. He's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, which is something the Jacksonville Jaguars have needed. So I like the selection. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, plus Calvin Ridley would have been 29. I don't really like paying $25 million for a 29-year-old wide receiver. Brian Thomas is young. I mean, I've heard people compare Brian Thomas to Brandon Ayuk.
I have not heard that comparison with him. I've heard it with, believe it or not, with Ricky Pearsall, who the 49ers drafted. His ability to get separation, they've compared that to Ayuk. But I have never heard the Brian Thomas, Brandon Ayuk comp, but I can kind of see it. I can kind of see that.
Who's the one guy you would compare Thomas with?
Who did I compare Thomas to?
Yeah.
I didn't. I haven't compared Thomas to anybody. I've heard Ricky Pearsall, the guy the wide receiver the 49ers drafted. I've heard him compared to Brandon Ayuk.
Honestly, when I saw Ricky Pearsall, I saw good, but I thought Pearsall would have been a middle second round pick, and Land McConkey would have been San Francisco's pick at 31, not the other way around.
I listen. You're not going to get any argument from me because I love Lad McConkey. You're not. I absolutely love him. He was my wide receiver 6 in this class. So for him, I had him at 6. He went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He was the 9th wide receiver drafted. To be honest, between picks 28 and 37, there was 7 wide receivers drafted. So they're all in that same tier for me because we had at 31 or 28 was Xavier. Well, heck, we can even go 23. 23 was BT. Xavier Worthy was 28. Ricky Pearsall was 31. Xavier Leggett 32. Keon Coleman 33. Lad McConkey 34. Jalen Polk, who I don't believe went before pick 50, but that's just me. He went to New England, which should not surprise anybody. New England doing something weird in the draft because they're smarter than everybody else apparently. And then Adonai Mitchell, he went 52, so there's a gap there. But I would have taken Adonai Mitchell. I would have taken Malachi Corley, both of them before I would have took Jalen Polk if I was to New England. But again, New England, their front office, whatever they're doing up there, they're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, Polk surprised me. I thought Polk was a second-round guy. I mean, I knew all 3 of Washington's receivers would be drafted fairly high. I thought Polk would have been a second-round guy. I mean, the Patriots had to draft wide receivers. I mean, the problem is, can New England draft and develop a wide receiver? But that's a story for another day.
They have not proven that they could draft wide receivers, and they have not proven that they can trade for wide receivers. So outside of Randy Moss, right? Like how far back are you willing to go before you can see a wide receiver that was either drafted or traded for or even really signed in free agency for New England that was actually a success? Like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman coming over from wasn't Julian Edelman, wasn't he? No, he didn't play for Miami. Wes Welker played for Miami. Julian Edelman, I guess, was the last wide receiver they got. Before that, it was Randy Moss. Like you're going back, quite a while. They traded for Mohamed Sanu. They traded for Devontae Parker. They gave a 3rd round pick for Devontae Parker. They gave a 2nd round pick for Mohamed Sanu. Like they've just done horrible things to wide receivers, and it's never worked out for them. And I like Pop Douglas on New England. I think he's a great slot receiver. I think he's a great wide receiver 3 for teams. But like that team, in my opinion, has got more wide receiver 3s on it than any team in the league because they don't have that true wide receiver 1. They don't have a true wide receiver 2. And I'm sorry, Jalen Polk is not a wide receiver 2 in the NFL. He's going to be a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4.
Yeah. While the Green Bay Packers can draft receivers every year, the New England Patriots can't draft one. I don't know why.
If I'm the Patriots, what I'm doing is I'm calling over to Pittsburgh and saying, hey, who do you guys have scouting for wide receivers for you? Okay, I'm willing to give you a future 2nd round pick for this guy. Because one team that can draft wide receivers in the 2nd and 3rd round is definitely the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And of course, who did the Steelers get this year? Roman Wilson from Michigan.
One of my favorite wide receivers in the draft. I absolutely love Roman Wilson. I got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl. I got to watch him and practice all week and at the Senior Bowl game. Like, just an absolute dog of a wide receiver. And personally, I should have seen Roman Wilson to Pittsburgh Steelers coming. I wish I would have put a little bit of money on that, because when we were at the Senior Bowl, he was pulled aside. Him and Quenyon Mitchell were both pulled aside by Mike Tomlin. And Tomlin said, "Hey, I want to see you two guys go one-on-one against each other." And this was the second day of practice. No, it was the third day of practice, excuse me. And that third day of practice, Quenyon Mitchell lined up against Roman Wilson in one-on-one drills, on 7-on-7 drills, and on 11-on-11 personnel drills. Like every time Roman Wilson was on the field, Quenyon Mitchell was across from him. And he talked about how Mike Tomlin, and he had interviewed with the Steelers like 2 or 3 times while at the Senior Bowl. And he was just glowing compliments of Mike Tomlin and their relationship and how much they had talked and all that. So, like, there was all these tea leaves that Roman Wilson gave from an interview we did at the Senior Bowl. And I should have seen it coming that he was going to end up in Pittsburgh, but I did not have Pittsburgh taking him. And I should have, because he fits what they want to do. He has that mentality that they like in that organization. And Mike Tomlin was glowing about him. Even when you ask Mike Tomlin about him, like, he was glowing over how much he loved Roman Wilson. And then you're talking about he's coming from Michigan, championship pedigree there, right? Like, so yeah, we absolutely should have seen that.
So ultimately, it could be a team, it could be a player, it could be, for dynasty fantasy purposes. Who do you think was the biggest draft winner in Detroit?
Well, if I were to go individual player, I'm going to go. I mean, it's the easy one is Caleb Williams, right? Like, you look at what he's got to throw to in Chicago. Cole Kmet, Keon, what's his name? Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. Like, you look at the backfield back there, DeAndre Swift, Roshan Johnson, and who's the other running back that they have back there? They got one more. It doesn't matter. They got skill position players all over the place. So he's falling into an absolute great position. Another one, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen in a long time. Coming in, he goes to the Arizona Cardinals. They've got Kyler Murray. They've got McBride at tight end. They drafted Trey Benson to pair with James Conner in the backfield. It's like that. They have no other wide receiver threat besides Marvin Harrison. Like, he's going to get fed a ton, and he's an absolute beast. So I love those guys, but those are easy picks. Same thing with Malik Neighbors. Like, he's going to get fed a ton in New York. Like, there's no other wide receiver threat on that team, to be honest. There's a bunch of short guys who are actually slot guys that they got paired outside. Darren Waller's talking about retirement. I believe he's actually, the organization believes he's going to retire. So, like, he's set to get a bunch of targets. So if you're talking about guys early in the draft, those, like, your quarterbacks are what they are. But Caleb Williams fell into a phenomenal spot. I love where Marvin Harrison went. I like where Malik Neighbors went. But if you're talking about a guy later in the draft, somebody that you could probably get, towards the middle of the second round. For me, I already mentioned him. It's Trey Benson, excuse me, at Arizona. They spent third round draft capital on him. They picked him number 66 overall. And if you look at the situation there in Arizona, like, James Conner, outside of, I believe, even last year, I believe he had some injuries. I don't think he's ever played a full season. It was his first year rushing for over 1,000 yards in the NFL last year. And he's coming up on the last year of his contract. So this is going to be a great situation for for Benson, where he can come in. You know, he's not going to get the starter's workload. He'll share the load with James Conner. I highly doubt that Arizona is going to sign James Conner for another contract. Let me see how old he is. I think he's
29.
approaching. Yeah, so he'll be 30 next year. Well, he'll be 30 when the next season starts. Let me rephrase that. His birthday's in a couple of days, so happy 29th birthday, James. His birthday is May 5th. So going into next season, James Conner will be 30. They're not going to resign him. If they do, that's the wrong side of the age apex for running backs. Typically after around 28, 27, 28, they start to decline because of all the wear and tear and usage on their body. So a guy you can get, middle of the second round, Trey Benson is a guy for fantasy that I absolutely love. If I can draft him that late and know that, this year he's going to have a role, but it's not going to be a prominent role, barring an injury. And then next year, it's going to be wheels up for him in Arizona as the primary rusher. That's a guy that I absolutely love.
I've got a sneaky guy. If you're later in a rookie draft, how about Malik Washington to your Dolphins? I love the fit with Malik Washington there.
I like the pick. He fits a lot of what the Dolphins like to do. He's got speed, right? So that's the first thing. Watching his tape, looking at his metrics and whatnot, the first thing that pops off is his 4.3 speed. He's super fast, just like Devon Achane, just like Raheem Mostert. So that pops off. He was probably the best pass blocking running back in this draft.
Are you thinking of Jalen Wright?
I am. Who'd you say? I thought you said Jalen Wright.
I said Malik Washington.
Malik Washington. Okay, my bad. My mistake. I'm thinking I'm stuck on running backs. I'm a running back guy. Give me all running backs. I want them all. Yeah, I thought you were talking about Jalen Wright. So Malik Washington. Listen, we drafted 2 Washingtons. So one thing I learned from this draft: if your last name is Washington or your first name is Jalen, put some money down that you're going to get drafted by the Dolphins. Okay, it's just. I mean, we've got Jalen Ramsey, we got Jalen Phillips, we got Jalen Wright, we got Jalen Waddle. Like, we have all Jalens. We've cornered the market in Jalens, and now we're going to corner the Washington market as well, and get us all the Washingtons. But no, I do like Malik Washington. I think he fits. The one thing the Dolphins really needed was a wide receiver 3. Like, you look at our top 2 wide receivers, and Hill and Waddle, and they're phenomenal, right? Like, Hill, argument to be the best wide receiver in the league. You can argue Justin Jefferson. You can argue Jamar Chase. I'm not going to, say you're wrong. Like, the argument can be made. Jalen Waddle is, he's going into his 4th season. He's had 1,000 yards every year he's played. He's learning from Tyreek. Once Tyreek steps aside, I think, there's room for Jalen Waddle to even get better than what he's been in. He's been, like I said, 1,000 yards every year, set the rookie reception record. So our 1 and 2 are solid wide receivers. Argument to be made, best wide receiving duo in the NFL right now. You can argue number 1 and number 2 with Philadelphia. You can argue number 1 and 2 with San Francisco. You can argue with the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, you can make arguments for the Bears. Like, you can make arguments for a couple of different teams, but they're definitely in the discussion of top 5 wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 pairings in the league. But we did not have a wide receiver 3 last year. And Tyreek Hill, if you watched him at all last year, he would miss large parts of the game because of cramping, because of how much he moves around before the ball is even snapped, and then how much he runs after the ball is snapped. It's a lot of motion. He does a lot of running. Like, it's just a ton. And then Jalen Waddle, he missed multiple games last year, and when one of those 2 guys was out of the game, like, our offense was different because we didn't have that wide receiver 3. We didn't have a slot guy that could go out and be very productive. And Washington absolutely fills that role. In college, he was used a lot in the slot. They used him as an H back in the backfield. They used him out wide a little bit so he could play, the X spot if needed. But a lot, like 80% of his snaps was, I believe it was out of the slot, and that is something Miami desperately missed because our best slot wide receiver last year was River Craycraft and Cedric Wilson, and neither one of those guys is good enough to be what Miami needed in this offense. So if he can come in and he can learn this playbook, in a couple of years when Tyreek is retired, because he's already said he's going to retire at the end of this contract. There's going to be room for him to be the wide receiver 2 on this team and get meaningful snaps because the Dolphins, they'll play 3 wide probably 60-70% of the time during games as it is because we don't really feature the tight end and we want to run the ball, but the coach just, he likes to pass it more than he likes to run it. So, but yeah, no, I agree. Washington for the Dolphins is a great pick for your fantasy leagues. Yeah, he's going to have, some big games, but it's for me, he's more of a stash and know that there will be times where you can spot start him when one of those guys is not Waddle or Tyreek are not available.
All right, George. Thanks for hopping on. Hopefully, you complete your dynasty drafts. You win your 32-man league because that seems like a crazy league.
It is. It's crazy. It's fun, but it's absolutely insane.
And we'll talk before the Jackson Dolphins play at Hard Rock.
Absolutely. Anytime, Dylan. I appreciate it.